Hello, everyone, and welcome to Alaska Book Week 2025. Today, we have four authors here who are going to talk about works in progress. They're going to talk about books that they're working on. So, before we get started with a conversation about that, I'd like everyone here to introduce themselves. Alys?
I'm Alys Cylhane, and I live in Palmer, Alaska, and I'm the executive director of the Bright Lights Book Project.
Hi, my name is Jamey Bradbury, and I'm the author of The Wild Inside. I'm also the fiction faculty for Alaska Pacific University's low residency MFA graduate program.
Hey, I'm Pam Cravez. I'm a writer, editor, freelance writer, and author of Biggest Damned Hat about Alaska's territorial lawyers. Uh, yeah.
I'm Sharon Emmerichs. I wrote Shield Maiden, and I'm a professor at UAA. I teach early modern and medieval literature and creative writing.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's get the conversation started. So, the first question I have for everyone is what inspired the new book that you're working on? So, you might want to tell us what that book is and then what inspired it.
I'll just jump in since I actually have two different things that I'm working on and kind of an interesting story about why it's two different things. The book that I have just finished revising recently is tentatively titled Witch Please, and it's about some high school cheerleaders in 1997 who are secretly a coven of witches, and they are casting spells to get even with the boys and men in town who have been harassing them or treating them poorly. And the
I
inspiration
like
for
that.
this,
I like that.
the inspiration for that book is I was watching the 2018 remake of the movie Suspiria, which is a horror movie in which the witches cast spells by dancing, by moving their bodies. And basically, I was like, what a great idea. How do I rip that off? Which I think, that's what writers do, right? Like we borrow ideas from other people that we want to play with, and then we make them our own. And that's what makes an interesting story when we like shift the perspective and we're putting ourselves into that idea. And so my problem was like, all right, it's already been done with dancing. What can I do that is another way to embody movement and witchcraft? And I was like, well, obviously high school cheerleading, right? So I mean, I guess that brings me to a question for the rest of the group as you're kind of introducing your stuff, like the inspiration for whatever you're working on. Like, did you find yourselves stealing from other people or borrowing ideas and kind of making them your own? I'm like curious about how everybody else comes at that.
Remember, everything is derivative.
That's true. I have to say that I didn't steal anything, but I realized that the book title that I had was already a title or that I had wanted to have. What Comes Next was already a title by somebody that I really loved. And I hadn't even realized that she had written, it's Abigail Thomas, and she's an older writer who's written essays going all the way through her life. And her essays are wonderful. And the more I read her, the more I see the links between what I'm writing and she has written in the past, and it just felt really kind of interesting that what comes next is kind of a really what we're thinking when we write memoir. I mean, that for an older person thinking, looking back and then looking forward, that we're really thinking we don't want to just be looking back. We want to be looking to what comes next. And I think that's sort of how I maybe didn't think of what I was writing as memoir, but when I had a grandchild, I thought about wanting to think looking back. And instead of looking back, I'm now thinking look forward. So it was a really good kind of link. It was a nice, yeah.
So, what inspired your book, Pam?
Having a grandchild right before the pandemic. And so we ended up seeing a lot of her. And it had been, I'm really happy not to have small children. I mean, having children was wonderful, but I'm done. And it's really nice to see this child from a whole different perspective of having raised children myself. And yeah, and looking back at my family and wanting to share that, but not in too much detail. So yeah.
Um, I find myself to answer Jamie's question first. I do it completely unintentionally. You seem like you had a lot of intentionality towards your, I'm really interested in this like aspect of a story. So I'm gonna adapt it to my own thing. What I do is I'll be writing, and when I go back to reread it or to revise, I'll say things to myself like, oh, I must have been reading Jane Austen that day, because all of a sudden my writing morphs into like something recognizable from another writer. So I have to go back and rewrite those things to make it not quite so, at least linguistically derivative and things like that. So I think I unconsciously like absorb other writers that I'm reading at that moment, or my favorite authors or something like that, and weave it into what I'm writing. And I have to be careful about that, because I don't want to be like copying somebody else's style, or like not being true to my own voice or things like that. But so for me, it's almost always an unconscious thing instead of an actual choice. As for inspiration, I get inspired by things I'm interested in. So I'm also working on two books right now. One I'm pretty far into, and one is still just in kind of the first chapters outline stage. One is a not a YA exactly, but it's an historical kind of historical suspense novel. And it takes place in the late Victorian era. And I'm really interested in English history. I'm interested in anti-colonialism. So a lot of what takes place in this novel is revolves around things that happened during the Crimean War. And I'm also really interested in the idea of returning national treasures and cultural treasures to their original owners. And the Crimean War had a lot of looting and a lot of pillaging of archaeological sites that happened during that time. And so I've been researching how and when that happened. And part of my story is an attempt to return some of those things to their original sort of heritages. And then the other book I'm writing is a fantasy novel that revolves around a young woman who is a jewelsmith's apprentice. And I've always been fascinated by jewels and gems and minerals and stones and things like that. So I thought, oh, I'll write a book about it, and that gives me a really good excuse to learn more about it. So, I've come up with a story around this young woman who has a special talent, a sort of magical talent, with gemstones, and I've really been enjoying just putting my main interests in the center of books, so I get to learn more about them as I write. How about you, Alys?
Okay, I'm working on a book called Shelf Life, a book about an overabundance of books. This was not a book that was inspired. It's a book of necessity. I feel compelled to write this. It began with my retrieving a couple books from the recycling center, out of thousands of books that they were getting ready to shred and pulp, and the events that followed after that, and have led to a successful nonprofit. What I have learned is, first of all, that overabundance can be as stressful as underabundance. I've had to deal in lifting lots of boxes with some physical problems and mental problems with, well, not mental problems, but working 16 hours a day to keep this whole show on the road. And it's going to end with the state fair chapter. What two things that I'm seeing? One is that overabundance of everything is everywhere. It's just really astonishing to me to see wanton race. The other thing that I'm realizing, because it's been so difficult working so long to get this book going, that writers need readers, and that we all need to not just talk about what we're working on, but we need to get out into the community and deal with these books.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I have another question for you, and it's kind of a two-part question. And the first one is, how has what you're working on changed since you started it, and what influenced that change?
I,
I'm
go ahead.
I guess I wanted to say that I'm working on memoir, and it's a memoir that was set during the pandemic. So a lot has changed since the pandemic. And it's hard to think about writing in a period of time when you're writing nonfiction, where that period of time is so set in people's minds and has identity for so many things. It carries a lot of weight in and of itself. And so I've been keeping an eye on how people who the books that are coming out as now that are talking about pandemic, where pandemic becomes either very small or very big, depending on the author. And I think it's just something that I'm paying attention to. I'm not quite sure. Right now, I'm just leaving it the way it was at the time and not trying to recast it in a way that may reflect how we now think about it or how it's come to be thought in different ways. And I think that coming from a history background, where I started writing about lawyers who were here in the 40s and 50s, which is extremely sexist, and then talking to people, I mean, I actually did change, but I also had to be true to that time. And I think that informs how I'm thinking about memoir a little bit. It's that balance between being true to a time and also being seeing it from the time that you are in at now, like the latest time that you see it. So the latest time you touch the page, and that's all you can do.
For me, for the YA book, the way it came about is actually kind of silly. My best friend lives in London, and we chat on text every day. And she collects umbrellas. She has this huge umbrella collection. So I started calling her Bumbershoot Kate. Bumbershoot is the British term for an umbrella. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute, that sounds like it would be a really good book character. The Adventures of Bumbershoot Kate, right? And so I wrote it down and I told my friend, I'm going to write a book with you as my main character. And that's how it started. And I just thought I would just write this fun, silly little like Victorian adventure of a young woman who loves umbrellas and gets into all kinds of adventures. But what changed is that it's become a much more serious look at certain values and problems and social issues that were going on in Victorian times at that point. I'm really invested in disability representation. My first book, Shield Maiden, has a disabled main character. It's really important for me that anybody reading a book gets to see themselves represented somewhere. And I know disability representation exists and it's growing, but I still would like it to be a little bit more widespread. So I'm kind of dedicated to having that in every book that I write. And so I started doing research on how Victorian England dealt with people with disabilities, and I got caught up in this rabbit hole of the deaf community. So I created a deaf character, and I've been researching what deaf education looked like in Victorian London, and it was horrific, by the way, and all of these different elements of it. And so it changed from this lighthearted little adventure romp of Bumbershoot Kate into this like sort of deep dive into the social problems of disabilities and deaf culture in Victorian England, which I did not expect it to go that way, but here I am.
It's funny that you had this idea from just like a fun nickname that you gave to your friend. And like it sounds like, at first it's like a fun idea that you're just like playing with because it's entertaining to you. And that makes me think of like the way that I first wrote early drafts of the witch book that I've been working on, it was very much for like, I'm playing around with this silly idea and I'm having fun and this is for me. But like, there's this transition that has to happen, right? When you're writing for an audience, when eventually you want to publish a book that is going to be read by people who are not living in your head. So now you have to like change a lot of things because you you need to fit a certain tone, maybe because what the audience that you want to reach in my case is like an audience that enjoys horror novels but doesn't mind also thinking about like bigger ideas too. So one of the pieces of feedback that I got from my agent, who acts as my first editor, is this is a great idea, but first of all, the scale is too huge. It was like a 500-page draft that I gave her, poor woman. So she read this draft and she's like, the scale is huge. You're never going to be able to like publish this like 500-page book that's kind of like telling the story of this entire town and their perspective on what's going on. And plus, it's like skewing a little toward one tone rather than a tone that's really going to appeal to the audience that you want to write for. So I had to go back in, really pare down the number of characters that I was telling the story from their point of view. I pared down a lot of like the extraneous scenes that were happening that I had a lot of fun writing, but didn't necessarily need to be there on the page for the reader. I also had to really work on the tone, balancing this like aspect of scary stuff happening and kind of grotesque horror things happening with this lighter sort of funnier or more fun balance. I wanted this like light and dark thing happening at the same time in the book. And so really a lot of the changes that I found myself making were because I want to write for a certain audience and they have certain expectations. And I want people to be entertained by the thing that I'm writing, not just for myself, but with the hope that like I will find a readership and they will say, oh my God, this book by Jamey Bradbury was so good. What else has she written? Let's go find the other stuff. And hopefully, connect with my writing for a long time.
So I would say that Shelf Life is a memoir, and the writerly concerns are memoir based. I've kept to a straight chronology, but what I had to do was I had big chunks about my past history. For example, my father was a, a failed bookstore owner, and my mother got a job in a used bookstore salvaging books in order to live up to his expectations. And I um, finally figured that I couldn't include that and all the information about what was going on with me in that book. So I integrated pieces into the text itself. The other challenge has been to pay attention to setting, which is Palmer. If a podunk town like Palmer can have an overabundance of books, it's actually a crossroads for books and military people, retired people, thrift stores, recycling centers. If Palmer has this many books coming in, then I needed to focus then on this particular setting in order to show what's happening here. And hopefully in other places, then people will say, wow, if they have a problem, maybe we have a problem too.
Okay. Have all of you had the chance to answer that question? Any more comments about how things changed and what influenced it?
I can speak to my other book that I'm working on right now. This is the book my agent wants me to write, so I'm trying to prioritize it. She's like, the market is really hot for this kind of book right now, so finish it. I had the idea for this book maybe 20 years ago. It came to me in grad school, and so it has undergone a number of different evolutions and changes over the years. In my head when I first came up with it, I tend to start my books with a question. What would happen if this particular state of the world were true? Or what would happen if this particular thing existed, or what would happen if, my dad and I used to stay up late at night when I was in high school having these conversations. Wouldn't it be cool if the world were like this? And so many story ideas were born that way. And so my what if question at this point was, wouldn't it be cool if gems had magic? And that sparked this whole idea of the jewelsmith's apprentice, who has this specific talent for gem magic. And for the longest time, that's as far as it went. I didn't actually have a plot. I didn't actually have anything like important to say about it. I just thought it was a cool idea. And so about a year ago, I sat down and decided, okay, this story has potential, so I really need to hash it out. And as usual, like I said in my previous answer, I got really interested in social issues and social problems, and what can ideas of gem and gemology talk about in terms of culture. And so now I'm talking about like wealth disparity and all of these sort of different things that can connect to those ideas. And so I think my process really in developing a story is, hey, I have a cool idea, and then try and figure out why that idea is important. And sometimes it takes me 20 years to figure that out.
Well, Sharon, you make me think of a question that's related to change. And I guess it's this: is change for most of you a matter of aha, and it's a good thing, or is it a matter of, oh no? But and it's kind of like a discouraging thing, I guess, is what I'm asking.
I have two answers for that question. The answer is yes to both. So sometimes the change is aha, right? And even when it feels like, oh no, sometimes it's still aha. Because, sometimes you get a critique like, it's too long, or these scenes aren't working, or, I just don't like this character, this character isn't working. And your immediate reaction to that critique is, oh no, you're wrong. Like, don't tell me that. I like this. It's fine. But usually within that critique, there is some, even if you don't agree with it entirely, there's some kernel of information that's getting through to you. It's like, okay, maybe you really love this character, but this person says it's not working. Let's explore why this character might not be working, what needs to change, how you can shift this person, how you can use this character in a different way to achieve the effect that you want. So I think a lot of change is basically just opportunity to make a better story. On the other hand, sometimes change feels really like a big oh no. And I will give my example. It's really related to what Sharon was talking about with this whole like, I have been wanting to write this book. Now my agent wants me to write this book. So I finished this witch book and I got it to a place where I thought, okay, we're good. Like, we're probably going to go on submission pretty soon. My agent was going to give it one last look. And I thought, oh, we're just going to get like little tweaks, little tiny edits before we go out with this thing. And she came back to me and said, this needs significant revision before we go out on public, like out on submission. And of course, that was disheartening for me to hear. I was like, oh no, like I've put so much work into this and I'm ready. Oddly enough, I had also pitched her a new book idea recently because I wanted to work with her from like the very beginning of this idea to have her help me shape it. And her other response is she's telling me, you need to revise this other thing. In the same breath, she tells me, I'm really excited about this pitch. Could you just like completely pivot to this other project that you haven't even really started working on? Because I think that is what might be the stronger book and might be the thing that will sell better than this other book. So like this is another oh no, but also aha opportunity, right? Like, oh no, I have to write a whole other book now. But aha, I'm getting this opportunity to write this book with my agent in on it from the very beginning so she can help me shape it into the thing that we think will sell, will appeal to publishers. And also it's an idea that I'm excited about. And so having this buy-in from the person that's helping me shape my writing and my career, that's exciting because now she's excited about it. I'm excited about it. It's got a lot of energy behind it. And so this big change that isn't just within one manuscript, but within like hopefully a writing career it's an opportunity, even though I will tell you, when I first heard her feedback, I had a very low moment for a while. Sharon, I know you can relate to this.
I absolutely can. My situation is a little different, but very similar. I had been planning on writing a sequel to Shield Maiden,
Mhm.
and my UK publisher expressed extreme interest in actually turning it into a trilogy. And so I went like 150 pages into book two, and I was really digging it. I was really enjoying it. I was really excited. My agent was really excited. And all of a sudden, the deal, for a number of different reasons, fell through. And I found myself with a half done manuscript and no plan for what to do next. And that's when my agent came to me and said, "Hey, you know, this genre over here is really hot right now." She wanted me to, she's like, "Can you write a romantasy?" And I
Mm.
said, "Yeah, actually, I've got this whole file in my laptop of folders with just like book title names that I plan to write someday." So I went through it and I was like, "I can make that one into a romantasy, sure." And she said, "Can you make it a little spicy?" I was like, "Yes, sure, I can do that." She said, "That's what's selling right now, so write me that book." And so I really did have to pivot from this thing that I loved so much and was so invested in and so hopeful for. It already had a reader base. They, the story and the characters already had fans and things like that. And I had to pivot to something completely new. So I had a humongous, oh no, moment. I was devastated. I really was. But once I got into writing the new book, I got excited, and I got invested, and I'm really enjoying it, and things like that. So I'm with Jamey. The aha and the oh no are oftentimes one and the same, and you can't separate the two.
Pam, what about you? Aha
Well,
or oh no or both?
I'm trying it. I'm not writing in the same kind, and I don't
Sorry.
have the same sort of, I guess I would think about it more in terms of mentorship, and as far as the kind of steering, what influences what I do, is more, I don't know, maybe I'm just at a different place, but uh, I'm at that point where it's like I have something I know it needs to change, and I'm working on one project, and I may have other things that I'm working on, but I want to see this one project and figure out where it goes and where it finishes. I'm not I'm not at that point where I'm thinking about what an agent or the market looks at. I'm thinking about it more in terms of what I want to be writing. I think I spent a long time doing writing for pay and speech writing and radio and editing and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sort of at a point where I don't want someone to tell me, "Oh no, no, don't write that. Write this." I'm like, and I don't want to write in somebody else's voice. I want to see what I want to write, and I'm interested in doing that, and I'm interested in doing it in different formats too. I like to tell stories. So, Arctic entries or trail tales, those kind of things. So other ways of kind of expressing a nonfiction story. I like thinking about how the different forms, the way you tell a story changes in different formats that you use. So in a radio commentary where you're reading something will be different from a storytelling where you're telling a group of people, and then when you write an essay it's different too. So I love that idea how you can tell one story in many different ways and formats and connect to people, and they can hear it in one way and that they may not be able to hear it another. So I'm really much more into that storytelling, and I fear all of those gatekeepers. I mean, I have to say that sort of thing can kind of stop me in my tracks, and I have to, and so now, and also being hypercritical of my own work can do that. So I find the different forms of telling and different forms of expressing have less gatekeeping. So if I just tell a story for Arctic Entries, I can just tell it my way, or um, any sort of ways. It's really fun to kind of figure out the way that opens up your own creativity and stops the gatekeepers that you have yourself. Because I think we all have them. All writers have gatekeepers, all writers. And the more we can do to kind of get rid of those gatekeepers and just be true to our own writing and our own skill set. And yes, we have, we can do that in careers. We can do that however we're doing it. But just to be writing in a way that you're free to do what you want to do and still do the things that are going to sell too.
That's great. That's great. Alys, what about you? Aha or
Okay.
uh-oh.
The question is an excellent one, and I've thought about a lot about it, and not just with the text, but in my own life, because with memoir, the writing and the text are one, and it's hard to get away from that. I need to speak just about the changes in my own life. I used to have an idyllic life where I wrote for 8 hours a day. I horseback rode in the afternoons. I read in the evenings, and everything was just fine. And then when I began working on this project, my writing time became more and more compressed. I stopped for a while, and I resumed writing, um, giving myself 1 hour a day, sometimes at 5 in the morning, sometimes 11 at night. Because of my mentor Donald Murray, who said this: "Nala sine linea." Right. Just even if you have very little time, just do it. And so the fear has kind of put a crimp on the writing right now, but I'm writing in my head. I'm working on it. I'm taking in details about things, but this is not a change that I particularly enjoy, but it's been one of necessity to get the word out there, in part that writers need readers. And if we don't address the problem of books in overabundance, then we're just going to be writing into a vacuum.
Okay. Well, I want to switch gears here a little bit, but I think this is related to this idea of change being and Jamey, you almost answered this when you talked about the aha, oh no, and that is, how do you keep the momentum going? I mean, you have jobs, you have lives, you have families, but you probably love your project. So how do you keep how do you keep the momentum going despite everything, including the gatekeepers and the disappointments?
I'll begin and say I don't know. I don't know how I'm keeping the momentum going. It's just of necessity. I guess I know that I have a very important book that's going to be timely and is going to get people thinking, and that's motivating me to keep going at it.
Pam, what about you?
I just have a routine. I just make it a routine. I don't make it anything else. Sit down certain time of day, do the writing, and then thank you for having it. Yeah, I'm sorry. It was right. I mean, I really do just say that it's a job and that's it. But I'm at a point in my life where I can do that. And there were many years where I couldn't. And I was just I want to say as productive, and I hope probably not more productive when I didn't have so much time. So I think it's that commitment to just sitting down.
Sharon?
It's interesting because I was thinking about what Pam said about gatekeepers and or who was it who said, was it you, Pam, that you want to get rid of the gatekeepers? My gatekeepers actually help me keep my momentum. I do extremely well with if somebody gives me a deadline. If somebody doesn't give me a deadline, if I give myself like an arbitrary deadline or something like that, I have no problem just blowing right past it and ignoring it. I don't know why. But if my agent gives me a deadline and I know I'm accountable to somebody else, then I will actually do it. And so I'm constantly, when I have my meetings with my agent, and she says, all right, you need to have this book done by so I can take it to the Frankfurt Book Festival, the book fair, or the London Book Fair. I'll say, great, give me a date that I have to get the manuscript to you. And she will, because she knows that's what I need. And so if for whatever reason, if I'm accountable just to myself, I get a little loose and woolly with deadlines. But if somebody else is expecting something from me, I will actually get it done. The
I'm a deadline junkie. I love that. I don't think when I said gatekeepers, I meant that. I mean, an agent who tells you you have a deadline, that is gold.
that is gold,
That is not
absolutely.
anything. I mean, I used to be a journalist, and it's like those deadlines were like, oh my God, yes. I mean, you're the most productive before a deadline. There's no question. I am with you 100%.
I
Yeah.
just had an aha moment. I sounded kind of low about it, but there's joy in the process of writing when you
Mhm.
figure something out and you do have those aha moments. And that's what keeps me going.
I love those moments.
Jamie, what did
Yes.
oh, I'm sorry.
I just one more little thing, and then we'll pass it over to
Okay.
Jamie. The other thing that I did was I did find myself not having enough time to write. I'm a full-time professor, which, as Trish, you know, is like two jobs, you know, two full-time jobs at the same time. I wasn't writing as much as I wanted to, and so I decided, all right, I'm just going to carve out some space for myself. And so I applied for a sabbatical from the university, and fortunately, it was granted to me. So this past year, I spent the whole year just writing, and it was fabulous. It was absolutely amazing. I'm back at the university now, and I'm gonna be struggling with you know, balancing both of my careers. But I knew I needed to do something to give myself space and time, and so I fortunately had the avenue to apply for a sabbatical. And you know, I had to make it happen. It wasn't going to be something that was just handed to me. I had to figure out a way to give myself what I needed to get this book actually rolling, so I can like establish a momentum that I can then sort of keep going. So sometimes you have to take drastic measures to get done what you need to get done.
Yes.
Speaking of drastic measures, so like the practical aspect of like sitting down and writing, like I too have to like carve out time, and like I work by a schedule. Like I'm writing is always the first thing I do during the day. If you are looking for a sabbatical but can't take one, I highly recommend getting let go of your job due to reduction in force. I don't actually recommend that. That did happen to me recently though, and I gotta say, like, it does free up a lot of time for focusing on a big project. So bright side to everything, right? But going beyond just like the practicality of like, yeah, how do I keep the momentum of making that time, finding that time, being able to actually sit down and write? I think the other thing about momentum is like, how do I get myself and keep myself invested in this project, even when I don't necessarily have like publication on the horizon, or I don't necessarily have a readership? I mean, a lot of people who are going to be watching this, I'm assuming, are people who want to write for an audience and haven't found the way to do that yet. And so that can be really hard. You're sitting in your little room at your little desk with your pen and paper or your computer, and you're just writing into the void, it feels like. And it's hard to keep up the enthusiasm for something that no one else might see. And so whenever I am in that headspace of like, I don't know if this is ever going to see the light of day. I don't know if I'm ever going to find a reader who isn't like my best friend who's just going to tell me, hey, it's great. Um, what I think about is going back to that space where I am writing for myself, I am having fun, and I am chasing my obsessions. I actually read an essay this morning during my pre-writing time by this writer, Isaac Fellman. And in this essay, they said, denying the things that obsess us is the quickest way to halt our development as writers. And I thought that was so smart because, like, so often I'll be like, why am I writing this crazy idea? Like, nobody else is going to be into this. It's absolutely bananas, but I'm having fun and I'm interested in it. And so that keeps me chasing this, like, absolutely bananas idea, which in the case of what I, talked about happened to me with my agent, the absolutely bananas idea that I thought was not going to work is the thing that I ended up pitching to her and that she is absolutely bananas about. So, I mean, sometimes your weird obsessions are the things that are going to be like the most successful ideas, in addition to keeping you going, even when it feels really hard to sit down and write. It feels like whatever you write is never going to be read. When you're in that place, I say just chase what feels fun and good to you. Chase the ideas that, make you an obsessed person.
I know that when we both teach workshops, both of us really emphasize you have to write the book you want to write. You have to be true to your own vision and your own voice and your own stories, no matter what, feedback you get from your agent, from your professor, from your friends, from your family, whatever. Because one of the things I think we've both discovered is that no matter what you write, there will be an audience for it. You just have to connect with them, right? That I do remember both of us telling students, write the book you want to write. And I think that's such an important message for, student writers, new writers, debut writers, whatever stage of writing you're at. I think that's such an important message to keep going.
Okay. Well, I want to switch gears from momentum and talk about challenges and struggles. And perhaps you have talked about them a little bit already, but can you think of things or think of challenges that you faced or obstacles or struggles and perhaps maybe how you dealt with it? And is this like a big thing in your life, a one-off or ongoing, I guess, is what I mean by that. Sharon?
Yeah, I'm thinking back to that sequel that I didn't get to write. That was a big blow. I was devastated by that. And it actually did kind of put a hiccup in my writing for quite a while. I had this other book idea. I had this other book I was excited about, but for the longest time, I didn't make much progress on it because whenever I sat down to write, this other book just sort of intruded, and I wanted to be writing this other book. I wanted to be writing this sequel and not this romantasy. I wanted to be continuing my story with these characters that I had developed and loved and sent out into the world.
Sounds like you were made to go into an arranged marriage and you had to let the love marriage go away.
It is. It absolutely is. And I had to learn to love the new project as much as I did the previous one. But for the first time in my entire writing life, I actually experienced some writer's block. I experienced getting in my own way as a writer, of frustration with not making the progress that I was wanting. And so one of the things I actually did was I started therapy. I started counseling. And I talked to her about these things, and I said, I need some coping mechanisms. I need some ways to get myself into, writing this other book. And so one of the things we've been working on is how can I change the way I'm thinking, change the way I'm looking at these projects. And the other obstacle I really had that paralyzed me for quite a while was Sheila did quite well. It became a top 10 bestseller, and I was kind of paralyzed by that. And one of the things I said to my therapist was, I said, what if this book doesn't do that? What if it doesn't become a bestseller? What if it doesn't sell as well? What if people don't like it as much? And I was just paralyzed. I was scared to write it because I was terrified it wasn't going to live up to what I now felt were these expectations. And she looked at me, she's like, why does it have to? It doesn't have to be a bestseller. It doesn't have to sell. It just can be what it is all on its own. And that was like this revelation for me that actually opened up the gates and allowed me to really start working on it in earnest, because I realized, the problem and the obstacle was my own thinking, was my own fear, was my own expectations. I was afraid that, it would not succeed on its own merit. And as Jamey said, that's what every writer sitting in their little room at their desk with their computer or their pen and paper feels, right? It's like, what if it doesn't go anywhere? What if nobody wants it? What if nobody reads it? So even if, you're a published writer, those fears and thoughts are incredibly intrusive and can impede progress. fortunately, I was able to get past that. I am now deep into this new book, and I have a deadline of the end of December to finish a draft. So wish me luck.
Okay, deadline.
Exactly.
And Jamey, what about you? What about your challenges, one-offs and recurring?
Yeah, I think the big challenge that I'm like literally facing right now comes from this, situation that I described to you all. Like, my agent now is very invested in this idea. I am too. But I did this big revision and it got kind of shot down. And now I'm having kind of like this crisis of confidence, right? Like I spent a few days thinking like, oh man, what if I'm not as good a writer as I thought I was? Like, my agent is excited about this idea, but what about the execution? Like, can I write this book? Like, what if I don't do a good job writing this book? What if, the execution is not what she expected and I'm just like a failure. And so I think like Sharon said, there a good therapist is helpful. You can really get inside your own head and that can stop you even from the act of writing, right? And so I'm working through this right now. Like I'm forcing myself to get into this new project because I am excited about it. And I'm trying to like shut that voice up that says maybe you're not going to be good enough. I think the other solution that I'm looking toward to kind of battling that you're not good enough, you're not the writer that you think you are voice is doing things like this, honestly, is like seeking out community, talking about the stuff that makes us feel insecure about our writing or not confident. I actually literally thought about emailing Trish and being like, I don't want to talk about works in progress because my works in progress are kind of a mess right now. But I'm glad that I have because this is solace, right? Like this is community. I'm also trying to do things like small projects that I know I can execute well. Like I'm doing more freelance work. I'm, sending stuff to my editors at different magazines and saying, yeah, what do you think of this story? I'm working on smaller projects like little short stories that maybe I'll try and send out. Like I haven't sent out short stories for consideration in literary magazines and websites in ages. And that feels like a good, smaller endeavor that I can make that'll be something that I put out into the world. And either it'll be received or it won't be, but it just gets me out of the headspace that's just like this echo chamber. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. I think when we get outside of ourselves, have conversations like this, do work that we put into the world, those are the things that can kind of like build us back up and give us more confidence so we can jump onto these bigger projects that feel scary.
So I have a question as somebody who is a reader and not a writer, and that is, do you mind when we ask you how your project is going, or does that just does all the frustration and stress just rise and you're like, don't ask me that question, please? I don't know.
Depends on the day. No, personally, I think it is always lovely when someone asks you how your work is going because it says that you care and you're interested in like this fictional world that I'm playing around with. Last week had somebody ask me, how's the book going? I might have burst into tears. This week I'm doing better. And I can say, it's going. I think when you ask any writer that, like sometimes you're going to get the blow off answer, like, it's going fine, thank you. Or, yeah, whatever. I'm writing. And sometimes you'll get the really excited answer where they like tell you all about it. But I think like I always think that that question is nice because it's like, oh, someone cares that I am doing this weird thing, sitting at my desk talking to myself. I don't know how
But,
how do the rest of you feel about that?
and maybe we need to ask it in a different way, but go ahead.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the things that get in the way of our writing.
Yeah.
And I find that I can get in the way of I'm an editor too. And so when I get to the stage where I'm editing and going over my work, like on the seventh draft, which I'm at the moment, and in your head, you have all of the other drafts. I mean, they're all right there. It's not even like you need to cut and paste. You have cut and paste internally. And I find that there has to be a point where you say that's good enough. And uh, a deadline is like a great, that's a great stopping point. So how do you get to that point of where you say that's good enough? Yeah, I guess that's the question for y'all.
Well,
My
Mark
my
Twain
challenge
said, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
my challenges, writerly challenges are memoir based, and they're more external really than what's going on in my head. The Bright Lights Book Project is really a free enterprise venture, with us starting by giving free books to people and then morphing into and envisioning literacy to change lives by making books accessible to people. And so changing the mindset of the board members, volunteers, etc., has been extremely difficult. And so the question is, how do I write about this without pissing off board members or funders or other people? Truth has a fine line, and I'm really straddling it here in attempting to tell this story.
I understand your dilemma hugely as a nonfiction writer. And uh, the kind of story I don't, I know that dilemma of so the oral history I wrote didn't get published until nearly everybody in the book had died. And I'm certain that it was because they had passed away and they were very
Right.
powerful people and had legacies. And I didn't say anything bad. I told stories. But I think just the concern that there may be, who knows, whatever concerns could have come up, but it didn't get published for like 30 years after I wrote it. So, and it's the
Good to
same
know.
book. It's not a different book. I mean, it's fairly, well, I updated and put more women in. Yes. We found some more women lawyers. I mean, there are other historians that turned up and found a lot more women lawyers than I had found in 1980. So, I mean, it was just, so yeah, that concern about who's reading it and how it affects relationships or work, or those are really things that I've struggled with too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can add that we're on a adversarial relationship with the recycling center, who did not want to see this project go through. And in fact, recently I got an email message that said, please stop saying we're burning books. And I never said they burned books. If you continue to do this, we'll take further legal, or no, yeah, we'll take further legal action. And I'm thinking, wow, this is an important part of this story, but how do I include it? Do I include it? This definitely has challenges that I have never had to deal with before on this scale.
Yeah.
Sharon, you were about to say something, I think, in response to Pam's question. Do you remember?
I was just gonna say when Pam was talking about at some point you just have to say I'm done. Um, I always have Mark Twain's little quote by my computer that says, "You never actually finish something that you write; you only ever abandon it." And so I'm a big believer in that, and I just wanted to give Pam that quote because it's helped me a lot.
Thank
Um,
you. I
going
appreciate it.
going forward and figuring out when I just need to stop.
Mhm.
Jamey or Alice, any comments about Pam's question? About how you know when you need to stop?
Yeah, sometimes I just need to, I like when I start to feel like I really am just talking to myself, like sometimes I just think like I have gotten this as far as I can possibly get it on my own. Like I need someone else to give me information. So I'll send it to a friend of mine who's always my first reader, or I'll finally just send it off to my agent and be like, I can't look at this anymore. It's always telling when you find yourself putting in the same comment, taking it out and putting it back. It's like, okay, at this point, we're not really making significant changes. We need to just move on and have somebody else look at it for a while. I do think time away too from a manuscript, or, a short, whatever you're working on, just like I always hate that advice, like put it away in a drawer for 6 months and then come back to it. I'm like, who has 6 months? Come on. But it honestly kind of is good advice. Maybe not 6 months, like a month, maybe. But yeah,
I would
sometimes you do just kind of have to get away from it.
I would also think that related to all this, are becoming aware of your own process and your idiosyncrasies. And I know when I teach, I try to teach that to students, know your process. And I think accepting your idiosyncrasies and your process, like I'm not kidding you, if I had a project to do, I would do like a writing project, like in grad school, I would go do some other project. One time I started to wallpaper and paint my inside of my house. Friends came over and said, we're going to help you finish because you need to get to work. And they did. And I'm not kidding. Sometimes it's just organizing a drawer, which is kind of like me getting ready to write something, maybe not like you guys do, but I've had to create and allow time for those idiosyncrasies to play out and accept them as part of my process. Painting the inside of my house was a little drastic, but sometimes it's not quite that drastic, but I have to accept that I need maybe 6 days where you guys might need 3 to do the same project, you know? So
Yeah. Or else, like, yeah, like I think there is, like, everybody has rituals around how they write, right?
yeah.
And like the challenge then is like to make the ritual not so elaborate that you're running out of rooms to paint your house. But like I sit down every morning, like I make my coffee, I do the dishes, and then I'm ready to sit down at my desk, read a little bit of something that might inspire me or make me think, check my email, and then get to work. Like that's a pretty short ritual, but I mean, honestly, it is procrastination, right? It's like I need to get through the ritual first before I can possibly write. But sometimes that helps ease us into, okay, now I'm sitting, I'm like actually engaging with material, I'm creating. But yeah, like the idiosyncrasies, like you do kind of have to honor them sometimes.
Well, I remember reading about procrastination. I think it was Ask Amy, and somebody had written in about how she was a procrastinator. And Amy said, and I've used this in my life. She said, if you're a procrastinator, do this habit I have, which is to start the day by opening the envelope, which can mean opening your computer and starting a document and writing a few things. Like just do something little, and yeah, and so make that maybe even part of your ritual or something, just opening the envelope, kind of getting just something simple to get it started. So
Yeah. Baby step your way in.
yeah, yeah. Any other brilliant thoughts or comments today, or do you feel like you had a chance to answer all the questions and anything you want to add or words of wisdom?
Well, the only thing that I think I should add is if you go out on the internet, you will find a bazillion lists of do's and don'ts for writers, right? It's like if you do all of these things, you are a writer. If you don't do all of these things, you're not a writer. I want you to just completely ignore all of those lists. I mean, there is no one formula that works for every writer. If you write, you are a writer. It doesn't matter what you write. It doesn't matter whether anyone ever reads it. It doesn't matter if it's published or not. If you write, you're a writer. And I think so many people get caught up in following what they think a successful writer does or is, and that can also create obstacles towards like progress and enjoyment. It can really like steal our love of writing away from us if we start comparing ourselves to other processes and other writers and things like that. So, for example, I'm the exact opposite of Jamey. I can't write in the morning. I'm a late night writer. I have to have my day finished before my creativity opens up and allows me to make progress. So, I do have like hours slated at specific times, but I don't always make a lot of progress during those times. So I make a lot more progress at 1 o'clock in the morning when I'm wide awake and my brain is overflowing with ideas, and I've got my laptop and I get some writing done. So I just find out what works for you, figure out how to make that happen for you, give yourself permission to to be who you are as a writer, and don't worry about how other people do it. Don't worry about these do's and don't lists, and you know, it's we all have to figure out for ourselves what works. So just I would just end with that caveat.
Excuse me, any other comments?
Yes, I'd like to say thank you to everybody. That's been a big help for me. But one thing I think that we should all be thinking about is our roles in getting books into the hands of appreciative readers, and how we go about this when we're working with our agents and our publishers, because we have a real problem with very, very good books ending up having limited shelf life.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's a good thought. Any other thoughts?
I just throw in, yeah, again, thanks to Trish and Alaska Book Week for organizing this conversation. I just want to remind people that if you are a writer and you are struggling with writer's block, or you're thinking, I'm not doing enough writing, remember that writing doesn't just happen when you're sitting in front of your computer or at a desk. Writing happens on long walks. Staring out
When
the
you're
window is writing.
painting your house.
Yeah, cleaning your house
Cleaning your
can be
house.
writing. Going for a run can be writing. And don't forget to engage with the world. That's where we find our ideas. That's where we find our community. That's where we find our confidence. So yeah, get off the page and outside sometimes.
Okay.
You should write a book on that subject.
Maybe that'll be the next thing.
Well, thank you, everyone. This has been a really, really fun conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.